Welcome to Shadow Tales Archive. Tonight, we invite you to descend into darkness with a chilling anthology of horror stories. This is episode 43. Let the nightmare begin. The voice beyond the veil. Nathaniel, it's me, God. Are you listening? I perk up and try to focus. It's been a while since God has talked to me. I whisper, just in case anyone else is in the computer lab with me, yes. Good. Nathaniel, listen closely, and whatever you do not turn around. The deep, almost guttural voice coming from behind me exudes authority. A jealous God, Mom used to say, is not exactly what I'd expect, but it is him. Of course, the last time God talked to me was when I was maybe 12. That's when I learned to trust God. He saved my life. I had just thrown a strike at Lucky Lanes when I heard a calm voice from behind tell me to move. I jerked around to find the source of the voice, but there was no one within 30 feet of me. Having remembered stories from my mom's youth about avoiding disaster by following the voice of God, I decided to obey the voice. I walked briskly back to the benches where my friends gave high fives, disconcerted by my hollow expression. Timmy began walking to the ball dispenser for his turn when an overhead light fell down, crashing just feet from where he stood. That's when I knew it was God who had talked to me. So here I am, years later in Southern Methodist University's library computer lab at about 10:30 p.m., working on an econometrics assignment, and God is talking to me again. While I got here a few hours ago, there was a smattering of kids here, books spread across tables, whiteboard markers squeaking, passionate whispering. The computer lab, where I've been camped out for at least 3 hours, has had a handful of students filter through. Some of them fellow econometrics students. I've never been ashamed of my faith. I've always taken pride in being God-fearing. So, resisting temptation, I obey. My ways are not your ways. I fix my gaze straight ahead and wait for my next instruction. That's when I notice I'm not alone. A girl in a striped dress sits 3 rows in front of me. I recognize her from my econometrics class. Lena, I think. What do you need, God? I whisper, hoping Lena doesn't hear me above the buzzing fluorescent lights and the occasional whir of computer fans. God says nothing. I feel my skin start to get hot, my mind running through all the things that God could be telling me. Is my computer going to explode? Did my mom die? Lena closes down her computer, gathers her things, and stands up, turning towards me. She takes a few steps forward before she notices me. Oh, hey, Nathan, she says, flashing a polite smile. I swallow, realizing I probably look nervous. Hey, she stops in her tracks, her eyes narrowing as her gaze moves from my face to just above me. Her hand covers her mouth. I start to turn around as a reflex to see what she's looking at when the voice stops me. No, God says. Lena whimpers, gives me one more glance, and runs for the door. I hear the door squeak open and clap closed. I take a deep breath. God, I say louder this time. Why can't I turn around? You remember what happened to Lot's wife? Yes, I say, remembering the first time I heard the story in Sunday school. What exactly is a pillar of salt? I asked Brother Collins. Faith, he said. A pillar of salt is faith? No, the point of the story is faith. We should have enough faith to trust in God no matter what. Turning away from God for even 1 second, as Lot's wife did, could be fatal. Nathaniel, stand up and keep looking forward, God says. I obey, seeing that I am now alone in the lab. I listen closely for any activity outside in the library lobby. I think I hear the distance clicking of a keyboard, but can't tell. The computer monitor 3 rows ahead, where Lena was sitting, flickers on displaying a security camera feed from the road in front of the library. The feed is motionless. I lean forward on the desk in front of me, focusing on the screen. After a moment, Lena enters the screen from the bottom, stepping down the curb to cross the street. Her phone is up to her ear. Look closely, God says. But does she need help? Why are you showing me this? Keep looking, Nathaniel. Lena stops in the middle of the road, phone still up to her ear. She slowly turns around and faces the camera directly. Her face transitions from terrified to somber, and she puts her phone down. A flash of headlights briefly enters the scene before a Mack truck slams into her, wiping the feed clean. The only thing left behind is a small spray of blood on the ground and her phone. Oh my gee, what the heck? I scream. An intense pit grows in my stomach, and my heart starts pounding in my throat. Others had to have heard the crash. God, what are you doing? Tell me, please. Did I do that? Or did I let it happen? The voice booms behind me, sounding impatient. I try to steady my breathing. What could God possibly be trying to teach me? Who are you? I ask through clenched teeth. You modern humans think you know me. You take far too much liberty upon yourselves to interpret my intentions. And I must say, you paint a very creative, very rosy picture of me. This can't be God. God wouldn't. I know what you're thinking, Nathaniel. I always know what you're thinking. I know everything you do. I saw the way you looked at that girl. But I didn't. By the way, her name isn't Lena. It isn't even Rochelle. It's Nikki. Lena is the girl who normally sits by her in class. That might be true. I see that deep, empty cavern in your soul. You try to fill it with school or with friends and love interests, and we all know how that goes. A door shuts in the distance. You try to fill it with religion, with me. You're not alone, by the way. Why do you think your mom and dad forced religion upon you from before you could walk? Because, yes, Nathaniel, because they also lived with that great void. It's why they named you Nathaniel, a gift of God by definition. Modern humans wear this facade, as if they have found ways to cope with that void. But they haven't, not really. No one has. And you know why? Do you know why the void exists in the first place? My knees shake, my palms sweat. I glance around the room, looking for something, some way to get out. Nathaniel, do I need to remind you that I can read your thoughts? Focus on me, please. Okay, God. My vision blurs as tears well up in my eyes. It's death. It's always about death. Death waits around the corner for everyone, every living being. Yet no one knows what awaits them on the other side. People pretend to know, but no one actually knows. And it's that unknowing that creates the cavernous void you all pretend to peacefully coexist with. Don't think about Mom. Don't think about Mom. Ah, yes, your mother, sweet Celia. She loves you dearly, doesn't she? Truly Christ-like, that one. From what I understand, she has breast cancer, doesn't she? Caught a bit late, huh? Maybe I should have spoken to you then. Wouldn't it be tragic if she died? Wouldn't it be tragic if she died tonight? From something completely unrelated to her condition? What if she decides to go on a late-night walk? I know Lorien Drive is a busy one. What if a newly licensed teenager coming home from a night on the town gets a text at the right time? From a girl he's had his eye on? A text that can't quite wait until getting home. Let me see. Eli Sanders meets that criteria. He's just stopped in a Walgreens to buy a gallon of water. His friend Brady told him that if he drinks a bunch of water after a night of partying, he won't have a hangover the next morning. He's getting back in his car. Oh, and there goes your dear mother Celia. She's getting her shoes on right now. No, God, please. Why me? Why are you doing this to me? Because, Nathaniel, you need to face death. The only way to fill that void, or at least partially fill the void, is to look death straight in the face and confront it. I know that you're a weak one. You know that as well as I. But you have great potential. Consider this a favor. A little extra boost. I know you're not God. God wouldn't be doing this. What am I supposed to do when faced with a demon? Something in the name of Jesus Christ. I turned Lot's wife into a pillar of salt, didn't I? Just for turning around. You believe that, right? I clench my fists. Mr. Eli Sanders is turning on a Lorien right now. Celia is 2 blocks east. Are you ready for this? Of course not. No one ever is. Now as this happens, I want why. Look death straight in the face and confront it. I swing my body around, knocking over my chair. Floating just below the ceiling is a dark, scaly entity. A man whose dark face shimmers in the light, with deep black sockets for eyes and a gaping wide mouth stretched into a smile. His head is bald with tufts of black hair coming off the sides of his head. His chest and shoulders are covered with a black cloak. In the name of Jesus Christ, I yell. He opens his mouth to speak, and an intense wave of heat blows my hair back. Black ink spews from his lips, and his voice takes on guttural overtones. But what if I really am God? Then your little trick won't work, Nathaniel, gift of God. The computer lab is overtaken by a hurricane of black dust and intense heat. I clench the desk in front of me, but it's scalding hot. The ground begins to shake, and ceiling tiles begin falling, crashing all around me. Computers fall off tables, shattering on the floor. The overhead lights flicker and die. The entity grows taller and taller, his smile becoming penetratingly sinister. For a moment, I'm floating in the sky above my mother. She's out for a walk, as I feared. She's in a daze, and I can tell she's been crying. I hear the screech of a car from just up the street. My mom darts her eyes up fearfully. The fire alarm in the computer lab pierces the rumbling, growing louder by the second. The shaking intensifies. The entity opens its mouth wide, and 1,000 blood-curdling screams emanate from seemingly all directions, drowning out all else. I lose feeling first in my feet and hands, then in my legs and arms, and then finally in my stomach and chest. I begin shrinking, and my vision grows cloudy. I try screaming but can't get anything out. My hearing becomes muffled, and then I taste salt. Smile of the pale Jester. Natalie felt as though she could float forever. The water was warm and soothing. She stretched out her arms and allowed it to embrace her fully, drifting serenely on the surface like a toned, bikini-clad starfish. Her hair, shoulder-length and darker than the Halloween night, which peeked in through the skylight like an inquisitive child, billowed out behind her. She closed her eyes, letting her head sink back into the gently roiling water. After what could have been hours, but was more like minutes, a monotonous voice announced via the poolside speakers that the pools would be closing in 30 minutes. Please exit the pools. To Natalie, the voice sounded muffled and distorted, but she knew the announcement by heart. She swam 2, maybe 3 times a week at the minimum. 5 minutes later, Natalie was padding along the corridor leading to the ladies' changing area, the tiles icy cold against the warmth of her feet. There had been other people in the pools earlier in the evening, but the last of them, a teenage couple who had frolicked in the shallow end, had left at least 40 minutes before her. She passed the on-duty lifeguard, Roger or Steve, or whatever his name was, at a junction in the corridors. He was heading right, towards the main entrance. She left towards the changing area. He smiled at her as their paths crossed, but made no attempt to conceal the way his eyes ran appraisingly over her, lingering on her breasts, smaller than most. But this didn't bother Natalie, before sliding down to her flat stomach and toned legs. She turned her face away, focusing on the floor-length poster to her left, an advertisement for a circus that would be stopping in town over the weekend, its glossy surface flush with figures garbed in all manner of vibrant colors, until the sound of his footsteps had diminished and the echoes had faded away into nothingness. With a rueful shake of her head, Natalie slipped around the corner into the changing area. The room was a large rectangle, with a bank of lockers running down the center and the individual cubicles on either side of them. Natalie headed to the right. She'd read somewhere that when lost, you subconsciously pick the direction of your dominant hand, and wondered if the same could be said for picking lockers, and unclipped a stubby-looking key with a fat square head from where it hung around her neck. Number 13. Unlucky for some, lucky for others. Natalie belonged to the latter group. Born on the 13th of August, it had always been her lucky number. She opened her locker, picking up the neatly folded stack of clothes with one hand, grabbing the straps of her rucksack with the other. This done, she headed to the closest cubicle, which happened to be the family-sized one. She had done no more than step through the door when she felt the floor slip from beneath her feet, and her last image was of the washed-out orange fluorescent above rising away from her, before something cracked the back of her head, and everything turned to blackness. Natalie is sitting at a long wooden table, over which is draped a tatty red and white check cloth. The table is pine, the cloth a thrift store purchase. This table is where she spent the hours when afternoon turns to evening every weekday for the first 16 years of her life. It is her mother's. The kitchen, too, is as she remembers. Yellow and red checkerboard style, tiling on the walls, drab green drapes at the window, and a sparkling whitework surface. Before she has time to take in any further details. Not that she needs to, every inch of this room is etched in her memory, and she could build a perfect replica given the time and materials. A subtle movement off to her left in the phone alcove catches her eye. Natalie whips her head around, and there, sat on the cheap plastic stool, the one that tilts to one side because the legs are uneven, is a little girl in a black dress with ringlets the color of late harvest wheat dangling down to the small of her back. Because it is her back that Natalie can see. The girl is facing the wall, assuming the position of her mother, who would spend hours at a time yattering away on the phone to Natalie's aunts. But the girl is too short to reach the phone, so the cherry red handset hangs on the wall above her head like an unreachable plastic bauble. The girl giggles, and the sound is unnatural and distorted, like an electronic laugh machine with a failing battery. Natalie finds herself unable to tear her gaze away from the swooping contours of the girl's shoulders and upper arms. There is something about them. They're so pale, and the way the light seems to glance off them is so. Smiler's coming, the girl rasps, and turns around on the stool. Now Natalie can see that the girl is not a girl at all, merely something confined to the shape of a girl. Skillfully concealed joints wink in and out of existence with every movement of her limbs, and the skin that Natalie thought of as flawless is smooth, emotionless plastic. All except her eyes. One of them is missing, leaving a yawning black socket in its absence. The other is a burning scarlet beacon, flaring with hellish intensity. The girl that is not a girl grins. It is a hideous, unnerving sight. Smiler's coming, little Natalie, she says again, and this time she sounds more human, more urgent, as though she is learning how to use her vocal cords for the first time. He's here now, little Natalie, and you need to go before he finds you. Her eyes fixed on Natalie, an insidious headlight searching her soul. Before he finds you. Those last words hang in the air for several seconds, and then the golden-haired girl's gaze flicks to the doorway at the end of the room and back to Natalie. The girl that is something else presses a single three-jointed digit to her lips in a gesture universal to all. Now Natalie is staring at the doorway, a rectangle of Stygian blackness cut in the wall, unable to tear her gaze away. From the darkness comes a high-pitched peal of laughter that slices through the silence like a scythe, the sound of 10,000 lunatics howling in the depths of a 19th century asylum. Something is materializing, floating in the gloom. Something wide, something crimson. A shock of purple begins to coalesce above it, below which two silver orbs glint like dollars. The crimson things smack together, a sloppy wet sound like a slug slithering across a pane of glass. The girl that is not a girl is screaming now, screaming in the darkness, and as the thing in the doorway moves forward, there's a hideous tearing sound, and Natalie wills herself to wake up. Wake up! For God's sake, wake up! Everything is up above her, and for a few seconds Natalie had no idea where she was. The floor beneath her felt hard and unforgiving. The base of her skull as though it had had a railway spike hammered through it. Darkness clung to everything around her, and her body felt stiff and cold. I'm dead, she thought. I'm dead. I am. And now I'm lying on a slab waiting for somebody to slice me open, to see which cogs in this particular human machine have stopped turning. It was the smell that finally brought her round, the strong, acrid odor of chlorine. Then everything was flooding back to her. The swimming, the lecherous lifeguard, the sudden descent into darkness. With her spine screaming bloody murder, Natalie pushed herself into a kneeling position. She sent one tentative hand to the back of her head and was relieved to find that she was not bleeding. There was, however, a lump that felt about the size of empty Vesuvius. God damn it, she muttered. What the hell happened anyway? There was a pale oval on the floor to her left. When she picked it up, her fingers sunk into it like a piece of rotten cheese. Soap slipped on the goddamn soap. For some reason, this made her laugh, and she had to knuckle a fist and cram in her mouth before a giggling fit overcame her. Abruptly, she became aware of the fact that her towel had fallen away and she was completely naked. Not that it really mattered. There was nobody left in the pools or the changing area to see her. As she pulled on her clothes, a pair of slim, fashionably ripped jeans and a sleeveless white top, a second, somewhat more urgent concern began to gestate her mind. Why were the lights off? Just how long had she been out of it anyway? Surely it wasn't possible that she could have been locked in. Wasn't there a security guard that checked the building first? She finished lacing her sneakers, tied her hair back in a loose ponytail, and hobbled towards the exit like a woman twice her age. Natalie was just about to turn the corner, marveling at how easily she was walking after taking such a fall, when she realized why. She'd forgotten her rucksack. It was still on the bench in the family cubicle. She pivoted, not wanting to waste any time in case the staff had somehow managed to lock her in, and was at the corner of the locker bank before she froze, her heart leaping to somewhere in the back of her throat. There was someone standing in the cubicle doorway. Whoever it was had their back to Natalie and didn't seem to have noticed her. She briefly entertained the notion that it was a security guard come to check that everybody was gone. But security guards didn't creep around in the dark, and they most certainly didn't wear such odd clothes. An oversized striped shirt with a wide frilled collar, voluminous pants that billowed outwards at the ankles, shoes longer than. The figure disappeared into the cubicle as silently as it had appeared. Natalie stood where she was, paralyzed with fear and indecision. It would be back any second, the thing that definitely wasn't a security guard, but what should she do? Break for the door and risk having it come at her unawares from behind, or hide and wait for it to move on? She was trying to pull herself in two different directions when the voice spoke up inside her head. "Smiler's coming, little Natalie." Natalie didn't know what the hell that meant, or why she recognized the voice. Artificial, yet somehow childlike, but the ominous implication of the message was impossible to miss. She darted around the side of the lockers, moving as swiftly as her complaining back allowed, whilst trying to remain silent. Natalie pressed herself against the cold metal lockers and waited. She didn't have to wait long before she heard it. A wet flapping moving away to her left. Something like the beat of dying wings against concrete. Something like a fish out of water. Or a pair of outsized feet slapping against a damp floor. Without hesitation, Natalie slipped into the closest cubicle, eased the door shut, God, don't let the hinges squeal, and pulled her feet up onto the bench, curling into the fetal position. Wonders abound. This went some way to soothing her aching spine. Smiler. The word had seared itself across her mind, a scorching brand. Natalie could only sit in the darkness and wait, as those sinister footsteps flip-flopped down the row of cubicles. They were close now, almost right beside her. Then they were moving past, towards the changing area exit. Something like relief started to bloom in her chest, but a terrifying thought crushed it as a child would an insignificant bug. The door to her cubicle was the only one that was closed. As if her sudden realization were the catalyst, the footsteps stopped dead. She heard the faint rasp of metal, and, oh God, it knew it was, Hey, you turn the hell around now. Natalie recognized the voice instantly. Mr. Adhikari, the ex-army instructor who managed the gym. A scar-covered beast of a man, with muscles that constantly threatened to burst out of the tight t-shirts he so often wore. She had heard some of the men refer to him as Nepal's answer to the Hulk. Seconds later, the screaming began, and the last threads of Natalie's resolve snapped. She lurched up from the bench and yanked the door open. The thing, Smiler, was hunched over Mr. Adhikari's sprawled body. The Nepalese man was thrashing like a wild horse, but Smiler held him firmly by the throat with a gloved hand Natalie could see. The other, although obviously in motion of some kind, was obscured by the bulk of its body. Adhikari's feet drummed frantically against the floor before falling still. Smiler turned its puffy, makeup-streaked face towards her. Its cheeks sagged like malleable dough beneath a pair of glinting silver eyes that winked from the gloom like beacons amidst thick fog. Something was hanging from its hand in thick loops and coils, and only after Natalie had followed its twisting, convoluted course did she realize that Smiler was holding Mr. Adhikari's intestines. The cavernous rent in the Nepalese man's stomach yawned like a bloody mouth. The painted balloon undulating before her in the darkness seemed all at once to tear itself in half. Smiler's face ripped wide in a demented rictus grin, exposing pointed teeth more numerous than those of a tiger shark, a deathly pale sky dominated by a wicked crescent of blood. Natalie stumbled backwards, her bare feet scrabbling for purchase on the slick floor, and ran. She bolted from the changing area with only one goal in mind: to put as much distance between her and the thing with the face like a swollen, liquid-filled balloon as humanly possible. Smiler's footsteps echoed down the dour brown corridor, slapping along with a hideous quickness that Natalie would have thought impossible coming from something wearing such large shoes. There was something green glowing at the end of the corridor. Natalie recognized it immediately, mentally scolded herself for not thinking of it sooner, and bulleted towards the fire exit, ignoring the screaming muscles in her back. Those flat, sodden footsteps sounded like they were practically on top of her, and she didn't dare to glance over her shoulder for fear that they were. Rancid breath filled her nostrils, the stench of a charnel pit overflowing with decaying corpses. The running figure on the fire exit sign was visible now. She was that close. Would the door open, or was it secured somehow? Did the fire alarms need to be activated before the locks were released? The closest alarm was back at. Natalie's thoughts were pushed from her mind like a derailed freight train as she slammed into the door release bar with every ounce of force she could muster. Then two things happened at once. The fire doors were spilling open and Natalie was spilling out of them. Something was tearing at her hair, grasping at the errant locks streaming behind her. There was a strange noise, something like a snapping rip or a ripping snap, and Natalie was tumbling forward onto a carpet of dewy grass. She righted herself in a fluid motion the equal of any seasoned runner, and without a notion as to why, perhaps she had realized that if he were still pursuing her, Smiler would have fallen upon her by now. Natalie whipped around to face the open doors. He was there, snarling and salivating on the threshold, inches away from the point where darkness became light, pacing like a caged bear. Beneath the pale mansion of the moon towering in the sky above, the purple-haired clown hissed venomously like an exotic tarantula, tossing a handful of wiry black snakes out onto the concrete. Natalie stared down at her torn hair extensions with an expression of mute horror. That close. It had been that close. When she looked up again, the clown was gone. 1 year and several hundred hours of therapy later, and Natalie is storming through the house, with a bottle of wine in one hand and her mobile in the other, searching for her purse. She needs the car keys to get to Danielle's Halloween party. But more importantly, she needs the cocaine that is hidden in the bag's lining. She has turned her bedroom upside down, ransacked the kitchen, and searched every inch of the living room, all to no avail. Now she is getting frantic. Her hands are shaking. Her head is throbbing like a blackened tooth, and her heart is palpitating like a wild thing. She is in the hall, resigned to a continuous hunt for her fix, when a floorboard beneath the stairs creaks, breaking the silence as easily as one would a cheap wooden plank. Natalie freezes mid-step and turns slowly to face the cupboard door, which is now creaking open inch by painstaking inch. Time has slowed to a crawl. The door is open wide now, and the cupboard looms before her like an open grave. She can make out the vague suggestion of a voluminous bulk standing motionless in the cramped space. They regard each other that way for several seconds. A deranged giggling, the flash of steel, the shattering of glass. Natalie gazes upwards at Smiler, the blood spilling from her stomach pooling with the red from the smashed bottle, shards of glass digging cruel fingers into her spine. The clown's grin is beyond unnatural now. It is tooth-shattering, bone-snapping in its enormity. The repulsive feel of Smiler's lips against the wound on her stomach. The soft pricking as rows of shark-like teeth are laid against her bare flesh. The clown with the painted face chomps down, its flabby cheeks quivering, and Natalie begins to scream. Static whispers on AM 634. I'm writing this as somewhat of a warning, but also a slight cry for help. I do not know who else to turn to that may take me seriously, and I know this community is often eager to help in situations like this. A few months ago in late July, I attended a music festival with my girlfriend, Chloe. This particular festival was in a small Wisconsin town called Twin Lakes. It went on from Thursday until past midnight on Sunday, so by the time we left the last show, trudged through the mud, packed up the last of our belongings from the campsite, and drove past the stampede of fellow festival goers, it was pretty late. Her and I have attended this festival for the past 4 years. It's pretty much common knowledge amongst the community that cell phone service is completely gone after the first day. I think it's a combination of being in a small town and randomly filling a small area with thousands of people that causes the service to dissipate so quick. Because we were aware of this, we fully expected to not have use of our phone's GPS system to help us navigate the town. This didn't worry us though, because like I said, this was our 4th year and had pretty much learned the route back home by now. Unfortunately, the usual route we were prepared to take was completely blocked off. We saw flashing red and blue lights in the distance, and later learned one of the festival goers had been struck by a vehicle. After waiting for 20 minutes and not moving an inch, Chloe and I agreed we should try and find another way back. We pulled a U-turn and began to drive in the opposite direction. After a few minutes, we saw a side street and decided we'd try it out. This road, well, it was dark, really dark. The kind of dark where you drive slow and blare your high beams, which is what I did. Being into horror films, I took the opportunity to make a comment on our creepy surroundings to Chloe. She kind of laughed, but I noticed the fear in her voice and eyes. Being the loving guy I am, I decided I would take advantage of her fear and scare her even more. Boyfriend of the year, am I right? I switched from the AUX settings in the car to the radio and immediately switched to AM. I scanned one by one until I found one that was just blaring white noise. I left it on and began making comments to Chloe in different horror-inspired voices, things like they're watching us, and tonight seems like a nice night to die. Don't you think? The crazy thing was, Chloe didn't find my hilarious jokes very entertaining and kept trying to shut the radio off. Buzzkill. I agreed to cut the act and told her it can all end if she played along a little bit by choosing one random AM station for us to listen to. With an annoyed sigh, Chloe reached over and spun the dial with little thought. The station she landed on was AM 634. She hit the spooky jackpot with that one. What we heard could only be described as a little girl singing with a high-pitched, distorted voice. I immediately began laughing at her selection, since it was exactly what I was hoping we'd find and so much more. I whipped out my phone and recorded a Snapchat video of our reactions. I continued to laugh while Chloe nervously chuckled. I actually found it strange and a bit unnerving myself, but did not want to let it show in front of her macho guy routine and all that. I went ahead and switched back to the AUX and continued our drive home. A few minutes after switching back, the music got cut off once again, and my high-pitched ringtone flooded the car with an ear-piercing jingle. The number was strange and told me it was from Russia, so I ignored it. I had recently purchased a URL from GoDaddy and made the foolish decision to not make it private, so my mobile number was made public for all the spammers to find. That meant receiving calls from randomly generated numbers became a common occurrence, which is why this one did not faze me too much. It did a little though. Most of the spam numbers I received were domestic. and were received during weekday afternoons. I had never received one at almost 1 a.m. on a Sunday night, let alone one from Russia. Not too long after rejecting that call, I received another. Again, it was an international number, this time from Morocco. I figured it was the same person as before, using the same random number generator, and once again ignored the number. A few minutes passed when, you guessed it, another call. This one, though, was in fact domestic. The call was coming from Phoenix, Arizona. Since this was from inside the US, and I was finally angry enough to answer and chew out the solicitor on the other end, I picked up. I wish I didn't. I angrily asked hello several times and did not receive an answer. Usually that would be my cue to hang up, but I was annoyed and felt persistent. Not to mention Chloe was watching, and macho guy routine. I knew someone was there because I was able to hear some background static and the faint sound of someone breathing. Hey asshole, I know you're there. What the hell do you want? What can you possibly be trying to sell at this hour? The silence lingered for a few more seconds before it was broken. I began to hear music, but not just any music. It was the same style of music we heard on the creepy radio station we had turned off just before receiving the calls. I felt my face get flush and sort of just frozen up, phone still on my ear. I don't know how long I sat there like that before I was snapped out of it. I hadn't realized what snapped me out of it until Chloe broke the silence in the car. Ugh, what does he want? I looked into the rearview mirror and saw what Chloe was referring to. There was a pickup truck tailgating behind us that had flashed at lights. The driver did it again, just one quick burst of their high beams in our direction. I had no idea what they could have wanted. I was going 5 to 10 miles over, so it wasn't because I was impeding traffic. It was a two-lane road with no oncoming traffic, so even if they were in a hurry, they could easily have gone around us and sped up. At this point, I was still on the phone and still had not heard anything but the music coming from the other end. For whatever reason, I did not hang up and was too distracted by the tailgater to try and pry more info from the caller. After about 30 seconds of being dangerously close to our car, the truck finally began to switch lanes in an attempt to pass us. It was dark, so I could not see into the driver's car through the windshield, and when they were beside us, we realized their windows were tinted very dark, definitely past the legal limit. In that moment, it did not mean much to me, since I figured they would speed past us and be out of our hair soon. That didn't happen. The truck got in front of us and slowly began to apply their brakes. Red flags everywhere. I had read enough stories of criminal encounters to know this easily could be a trap to rob us, or worse. I knew I had to be tactical to avoid any problems. Chloe, on the other hand, wasn't thinking so clearly. Feeling tired, anxious to be home, and now annoyed to her breaking point by this driver, she swiftly reached out her arm and pressed down firmly on my car horn. It wasn't the first time she had pulled this move, and it's something she does that I absolutely hate. I always tell her she's going to get us into some serious confrontation one day. A serious confrontation that will have to be handled by me. So I'm usually quick to grab her hand and remove it from the horn. This time, though, I was frozen. I was still on the phone with the mystery caller at this point, subconsciously transfixed on the chilling audio that was radiating into my ear. From the phone, I heard it, my car horn. It was delayed by a nanosecond and sounded far away, but I knew it was the same. I heard my car horn coming from the other end of the call. Whoever was in that truck was the person I was speaking to, the person who called us with the suspicious numbers, the person who was playing the same radio station we had randomly discovered, and now, the same person who almost got us to come to a complete stop in the middle of a Wisconsin back road at 1 in the morning. Fight or flight is a funny thing. It's very impressive how fast your mind can actually process information when it's fueled by fear. In what felt like a blink of an eye, my mind ran with the possibility of reaching for the baseball bat I kept in the back seat and coming at this driver with all my might. That fantasy quickly went south as I pictured a group of grown men with guns spilling out of the truck, killing me and doing God knows what to Chloe. I thank God to this day that the stupid macho guy routine came to an end right then and there. I quickly and haphazardly slammed down on the gas and swerved around the truck, picking up as much speed as I could. I might not have the fastest car in the world, but it's in pretty good condition. It was more than enough to escape the old, worn-out pickup truck that was following us. After about 10 minutes of speeding well past the legal limit, blowing stop signs, and living out all my Vin Diesel fantasies, we were back in the more sprawling, busy areas of our route. There was no sign of the truck. Chloe, who was screaming at me for the first few minutes of this escape, was reduced to quiet crying as she clutched a pillow tight to her chest. My adrenaline had worn off, and now I was feeling shaky. We had been riding in dead silence this whole time, so I reached down to the floor of the car for my phone. I figured we can both benefit in some cheery music to help lighten the mood, since we both clearly were not eager to discuss what had just happened. I grabbed the phone and tapped the home button. The screen illuminated, and I saw that I was still in the middle of a call. I never hung up the phone before speeding away, and apparently neither did the mysterious caller on the other end. We approached a red light, and I slowed down to a stop. That's why I put the phone up to my ear. My breathing was undoubtedly audible at this point. At first, I was met with silence, other than the same muted white noise as before. The silence was broken by the caller. In a deep voice, I heard one sentence that filled my body with nauseating chills. "Almost had you." After that, the call was ended. I must have looked shaken because Chloe nervously asked me what was wrong. I simply shook my head without a word and continued driving. About 30 minutes later, we arrived home. At that point, we were so exhausted that we walked inside, decided to leave unpacking the car for the next day, and dropped into the bed without even bothering with showers. The next morning, I grabbed the keys and went to go bring the car closer to our apartment entrance in order to speed up the process of emptying all our camping gear. I got to the car, and when I hit the unlock button on the keys, I did not hear the sound of the doors unlocking. Instead, I heard the dull thud of the locks remaining the same. In our tired days the night prior, we had neglected to lock the doors. I peeked inside the car and saw that everything seemed to still be there, including some cash that was visibly strewn across the passenger seat. I figured we had gotten lucky and proceeded to get inside. Right away, I knew something was wrong. It was the smell. Whether you know it or not, every single person has a scent. You can smell it when walked into certain homes or smelling someone's worn clothing. In that moment, I was picking up a scent that did not belong to me or Chloe. It wasn't bad per se, but it was undeniable, slightly musty with a hint of menthol. I got out of the car and inspected it once more. Again, nothing seemed out of place. I took a breath and told myself I was imagining things. Once again, I climbed into the driver's seat, this time ignoring the unusual smell. I stuck my key in the ignition and fired up the car. I almost jumped out of my skin when the radio began to blare. I could have sworn we had turned it off, but hell, I thought we had locked the doors too. It wasn't the radio being on that scared me. It was the fact that the radio was on its loudest setting and was programmed to AM 634. I could almost hear my heart beating rapidly as I stared wide-eyed at the console. I knew, for a fact, we had switched to the AUX setting. I just knew it. The radio station was no longer playing the haunting sounds as the night prior, and was now projecting the sounds of some obscure talk radio or news channel. At that point, I did not have enough energy to deal with this any longer. I turned off the radio and drove the car up to our building entrance. Chloe was waiting there for me. We both looked exhausted. Without speaking very much, her and I worked together to empty the car. I parked it back in our spot, and that was that. There were no more weird calls other than the usual spam, no strange discoveries with the car, that radio station, etc. I tuned into it a few times and found that it was still the same boring news channel. Since Chloe and I live in Chicago, I figured it made sense that it would change. Things went back to normal. That is, until last week. It started when I checked my phone in the middle of my lunch break at work. I had 4 missed calls, all from random numbers. The last one was the same Phoenix number I picked up on the way back from Wisconsin. That number had left a voicemail. In the voicemail, as you may have guessed, was more of the creepy music we heard that night. There were no other sounds or voices, just that damn music. Since then, I had noticed a lot of cars with Wisconsin license plates. It's probably all in my head, I know. Cars for neighboring states is nothing crazy. But it just seems like there are way more than usual parked around our apartment, driving past me on the street, etc. I would probably be able to brush all this off if it wasn't for what happened yesterday. I was getting out of a meeting at work and checked my phone. I had 3 missed calls, 2 from random numbers, again, nothing super unusual, and 1 from Chloe. She had left a voicemail. Upon playing it, I almost threw up my lunch. It was the eerie music. I called her right away, and she picked up after the first ring. She answered normally, and I began to ask her what the voicemail was all about. At this point, I figured she was playing a prank on me this whole time and just forgot to mask her number before making that particular call. I demanded she confess it was her, and when she finally started to cry while denying it all, I relented. I apologized for screaming at her. I explained everything that was happening for the past week and ended it all with her missed call and voicemail. It was quiet on her end. When she finally spoke, the adamant fear in her voice began to make sense. She explained to me that she couldn't have made that call. She was running errands and had been grocery shopping at our local mega-chain supermarket. In a rush to stay on schedule, she had forgotten her phone in the car. I don't know what to do. A small part of me still suspects she may be playing a very long practical joke on me, but she has never been the prank type. And even if she was, how could she have orchestrated the radio station or the pickup truck? It doesn't add up. All I know is I haven't let down my guard for a while. I'm carrying a knife on me and am looking into getting my conceal and carry license ASAP. I'm going to insist Chloe does the same. She's not a fan of guns, so if she is behind this, maybe that will be what makes her confess. Has anyone in the southern Wisconsin area, by any chance, had experience with this radio station? If not, please do not access it. I can't be sure the station itself has any connection to what's been happening, but why risk it? I'm scared, and I hope this ends soon. The Forever Garden. The monster came right before the end of summer. Nobody knew it was a monster, of course. No one ever does. The Harrows used to live in the house it moved into. Lena knew Celeste, their daughter. The two were in the same 5th grade, rode the same bus. They were friends. Sort of. Lena didn't really like Celeste, partially because Celeste talked incessantly about bats. That was her only conversational topic. Lena thought bats were nasty. She was happy when the Harrows moved away and she could stop pretending bats were beautiful or interesting. Lena thought pretending ugly things were beautiful was the saddest thing. She hated to think of people spending their whole lives thinking something was pretty when it just wasn't. She may not have missed the bats, but she certainly did miss visiting Celeste because she loved her house. It was beautiful, an old stone Tudor with a gorgeous garden. She worried about what would happen to the garden after the Harrows moved. Her mom told her not to worry. Everything always works out in the end. But sometimes things don't. One day, Lena saw a new car in the driveway. It was a convertible, shiny and new, Granny Smith colored. A few days later, walking past the house with her brother Eli, she saw the monster working on her garden. The lilies she had planted were a shocking white against the deep green of the lawn. The monster waved and laughed. "Come on over," she called. "I'm new to this neighborhood. Please sit down. I have lemonade and cookies." She poured lemonade from big glass pitchers with big ice cubes, and they laughed along with her big laughs that shook the garden. For someone so small, in her bright blue shirts and white and red gardening gloves, she laughed so big. She showed all her teeth when she smiled. Her and Eli went over almost every day. They didn't tell their parents. Ever since Eli got sick the previous winter, their parents worried about him all the time. That was all they talked about, other than getting into arguments with each other late at night about medical bills and the odds of remission and which oncologist they should believe more. But the monster didn't argue loudly and say mean things. The monster was nice. She made you feel electric when you were with her. Everything reminded her of a funny story. Every day was beautiful outside. Every glass of lemonade tasted sweeter. The sky stayed permanent blue. One day, she had a boxy old, antiquated camera. She took a photo of Eli while he laughed and told her to stop. She took a picture of Lena too, who smiled as big as she could, but she realized later, never heard the click of the shutter. She looks like a movie star. Like Julia Roberts, Lena would whisper to Eli when they were walking home, "Why do you think she lives here in silly old Greentown?" "I guess we're lucky," Eli smiled. "She's so pretty." It took Lena a while to hear about the missing children. School had just started, and although her parents tried to keep it quiet, they couldn't always be around to change the subject or shoot a warning glance at someone. So she found out at recess from Paula, the fat-faced girl who was always forgetting her homework. Kids had disappeared from the middle school. 2 in 2 weeks. No one knew if it was related or not. "Why would someone take a kid?" asked Lena, who was 10 and very smart, but in some ways not very smart at all. "I don't know," admitted fat-faced Paula, who wasn't very smart about most things save gossip. "But whatever it is, it can't be very good." That night, Lena wanted to ask her parents about it, but of course she couldn't. She decided she would settle on asking Eli instead, but he disappeared to his room after dinner and was no help at all. He hadn't been recently anyway, she had noticed. Something was bothering him, but he wouldn't say what when she asked. She was worried he was getting sick again, and no one was going to tell her. That was why she was trying to worry about the missing kids instead. After her parents stopped paying attention to her, she was able to slip off and use her dad's iPad. She had, through trial and error, become fantastic at disabling the blocking software her parents had installed, and, once situated, she was able to read up on the vanished children online. They were boys and both 12. Same age as Eli. The police weren't saying it was connected, but the comment section of the local paper was full of hysterical chatter about the boys claiming to have met someone older. One of the comments said one of the boys told a friend something about a green car. There was a storm that night, a big, awful one. All wind and rain and lightning. Raindrops banged against her windows like fists. Since she couldn't sleep, Lena found herself thinking about the story. What happened to those boys? Did they know each other? What happened? She could hear the TV in her parents' room. Some crime procedural show. She heard it click off. She stood up and walked to her window. The rain was still falling, but she could see the monster's house. She could see the car parked in the driveway, emerald and brand new. The next morning, Eli was gone. Her parents were hysterical, calling everyone he knew, then the police. The police came. It felt like a movie. Lena felt numb, weird, as if she was watching a television show that confused her, but she kept watching. The policemen were nice, but they didn't really talk to her. Her parents fluttered about. They discussed when they last saw Eli, what he was wearing, what he'd been talking about. A girl, his dad said. He said he'd been talking to an older girl. The policeman smelled like cigarettes and paperwork. Did Eli say a name? But no one knew a name. Lena went to her bedroom on the second floor and looked out at the neighborhood. Its perfect streets, its perfect trees, its perfect world. She stared at the house where the green car had been parked, but not anymore. The driveway was empty. 6 years later, she was 16, riding the bus alone. Her parents were divorced. She lived with her mom. They had an apartment now, instead of a home. House. She meant house. After Eli vanished, her parents didn't let her out of their sight. Everywhere she went, they followed, becoming tangible shadows on high doses of anxiolytics in the process. But watching her obsessively didn't bring him back, and so they faded out into arguments with each other. Whose fault was it? Who can I blame? How can a horrible thing happen unless someone allowed it to? How could the world allow that? Eventually, Lena drifted away from them, into the inchoate simultaneous anger and boredom of adolescence, and they let her go. Perhaps her parents felt, in losing one child, they had committed too grievous of a sin to even deserve the other. The day she was waiting for happened when she was coming home from her friend Ivy's house. Ivy wore Sailor Moon sailor-inspired outfits and only watched movies made after 1985. Her dad was teaching summer classes at Archewad College, so the house was always empty. Ivy's mom was dead. Lena didn't know the story, and Ivy didn't really volunteer any details, so it was one of those things people don't talk about. It was okay. Lena never talked about Eli. History was just something that happened anyway. Ivy had a koi pond in her backyard. Lena loved to watch the fish swim off into the edges, their giant mouths opening and closing. "Did you read that book for class?" "It's not a book, it's a story," responded Lena. "And yeah, I did." "Did you like it?" "I didn't," clarified Ivy, "but full disclosure, I don't like anything by Henry James." "I didn't." "Sort of." "Wait, you know what? I liked it. It was pretty messed up," confessed Lena. She both hated and loved how Ivy had an opinion on Henry James. Ivy was forever someone to envy and despise. "This guy, what was his name?" "His name is John Marcher." "Marcher." Why Ivy hates Henry James. Example 1. His character, who is always moving, is named Marcher. She shook her head. "For the love of Christ." Right. "So anyway, John Marcher," continued Lena, undeterred, "waits his whole life for something impossibly awful to happen. He has this feeling of doom his whole life. But in the end, nothing happens. No ominous event. No tragedy. And that's the tragedy." She paused. "If that makes sense." "Does that make sense?" "Sure. Maybe. We all waste our life, though, don't we? He takes such a long time to make that point. I asked my dad if it was about repressed gay stuff." Ivy continued, leaning against the edge of a tree in the backyard. She leaned well, noticed Lena, and he said, "If you're ever in doubt writing about literature, always argue the whole thing is about repressed gay stuff. Good rule. If I go to Archewad College, I'm definitely taking classes with your dad. Just don't let him sleep with you like he does his other students. That would make things between us so awkward. Come on, let's feed these fish." Lena thought of the koi the whole bus ride home. She had touched one once. Its skin felt strange, alien. She thought of Ivy and that story. The beast in the jungle. Life's the jungle. She almost didn't see it. Later, thinking about it, she wondered what would have happened if she hadn't looked out the window that moment. All lives are caused by these tiny accidents everyone pretends were choices. She could see the dark clouds above the bus. It looked like a storm was coming. Everything had a trembling vitality to it. Bent trees released bright green leaves. The pavement seemed to glow, and she gasped and pulled the bus cord to stop. For there, on a street in a nondescript neighborhood, was a bright green car. After the bus pulled off, she stood in an astonished daze next to a bench. There was a convenience store across the street, a woman walking a dog. Cars drove by. The green car was parked in front of a nondescript house. Well-trimmed hedges. Mowed lawn. There was no question in her mind if it was the right car. It was. Every little part of it was in her head and had been for 5 years. Things can get stuck in you and never leave. And that car was one of them. Her body felt so abstract, so distant at that moment. What do you do when you spend your whole life waiting for something and it happens? The monster stepped out of the house. Lena ducked behind a mailbox. Fight or flight, she thought, just like she learned in biology that year. What was it called? She peered out around the edge of the mailbox. The monster opened the car door. She looked the same. Exactly the same as she had before. Like someone had taken a picture of her and wrapped her up in it. The door closed. The car drove off. Flight or fight. As soon as the car was gone, she was running. Down the street. Eyes wide. Breathing hard. Her entire body alive. Raw and continuing. Autonomic nervous system reaction. That's what it was called. Your body tells you that you have to do something. It floods your neurons. You have no choice. The front of the house was too obvious. She couldn't go in that way. Besides, it was almost 5 o'clock. Cars were starting to pull into neighboring houses. Somebody would see her. She ran to the fence and climbed over, tearing a hole in the knee of her jeans. The backyard was full of lilies. They looked like bones in the green body of the yard. She tried the French door. Locked. Standing there, tremulous, she saw a landscaping rock. She grabbed it and felt the weight of it in her hand. Fight or flight? The rock shattered the glass. She reached in, carefully but still cut her hand. She unlocked the door and pushed it open. She was in the house, into the jungle, looking for the beast. She expected horrors, dead bodies, gruesome signs of inexplicable evil, things she would never be able to forget. But instead, nothing. It was just a suburban home. Nice couches, tasteful, if non-interesting, paintings on the wall, hardwood floors, stainless steel refrigerators, complete blandness. She wandered through the kitchen, the living room, upstairs. Everything looked horribly normal, nothing out of the ordinary. And then she noticed the closed door. It was on the first floor. The only door, she realized, that wasn't open. Inside of her, every nerve was surging, like she was electric cords across a wet sky. She took a deep breath. Fight or flight? She opened the door and screamed. There were shelves nailed into the walls, bright green shelves, and on them, overflowing them, were the jars, and the things inside the jars. They looked like they might have once been humans, but now they were shrunk down and distorted. A cross between a fetus and a fish on first glance, floating in dirty, brown-yellow water the color of leaves in October. On the front of each jar, a photograph was taped carefully, each of a boy, 12 years old, smiling at the camera, smiling at their photo being taken. The thing in the jar she was staring at was pink, malformed, gelatinous. Its eyes were different colors, and then it pushed against the jar. She screamed again. Had she even stopped screaming from the first time? She wasn't sure. In the face of impossibility, meaning slips away. All these things were alive, in some sort of horrible manner, she realized. Which meant if Eli was here, he was too. Mutated and disgusting and trapped. She started pawing at all the jars, staring at photos, desperate to see his face. His stupid hair. The things in a jar were jumping, banging against the dirty glass. They let out bubbles from holes that might have been mouths. Their eyes were pale jellies. She never heard the door open behind her. She was so intent on the jars, she never heard footsteps. She never felt the breath. "It has been," said the monster, "utterly too long." She didn't scream. She wasn't sure how. She turned around. The monster still looked the same. "I'm disappointed you don't look scarier," Lena said. Her body was vibrating. "I thought you'd have like a final form or something." Her heart was pounding. "Would you like me to have one?" The monster smiled like a movie star. She stepped closer. "You're a monster. Why don't you look like a monster?" "I'm not a monster." Lena looked at the jars, the abominations in glass. Her brother in one, somewhere. The monster watched her. She saw her bemused expression in the reflections of the glass under the bright, recessed lighting. "They don't know what's happening," she said. "They can't see any of this." "You think that makes it okay?" she asked, as one of the things mouthed near the top of the water, near the lid. "That doesn't make it okay. I didn't kill them. I made them into what they wanted. They wanted to be with me. They are. This isn't what he wanted. Your brother didn't want to grow up, Lena. He didn't want to get sick again. He didn't want this," she screeched. Her voice echoed everywhere. The little blobs floated. "How do you know?" "Do you? Do you really?" "Because I know," said the monster. "I know everything. I know you. That's why I came back here. I don't like to come back to places, you know. People can get ideas. If they recognize me, if they wonder why I look the same. It's nice, you know, always looking the same. It's nice always being beautiful. You're beautiful, Lena. You know that. But you know you won't always be." She walked to Lena, closer, then said, staring at her, "But it was worth the risk, coming here because I knew you. I knew you wouldn't ever let him go. And I wanted to tell you that you don't have to let him go. You don't have to let anyone go." Lena didn't say anything. She couldn't. Her blood was throbbing. You don't have to let anything go if you don't want to. You don't have to let go of you. Lena, you can hold on to yesterday forever. And it can always feel like today. You're a monster. This world is the monster. The world makes you grow up, makes you get sick, get unhappy, miserable, die. I don't want them to die. Neither do you. You can make them live forever. You can make them happy. You can be happy. Don't you want that? Lena went to scream. She wanted to scream. She felt like screaming to tell her, as a matter of fact, she was a monster. She wanted to kill it and find her brother and set him free and live happily ever after. But when she opened her mouth, she didn't say that. She didn't say that at all. Later, after the house and after the monster, after she got home to the apartment and had an awful and quiet dinner with her mother, she sat in her bedroom and looked out the window. It was a summer night, deep in the lushness of July, and the last dredges of sunshine had yet to cede ground to the inexorable night. Kids rode by on their bikes, happy and laughing. She was holding the old, beautiful camera. She was thinking of the explanations, the rules. She would start taking photos tomorrow. The monster said practice makes perfect, and now she could start to make everything perfect.
And that was tonight's tale from the Shadowed Tales archive. If it left a mark on your mind, if the silence feels heavier now, then the story did what it was meant to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the darkness. New stories are always on their way. Until then, keep the lights low and the doors locked.